Look, guys, this could be the ultimate win-win situation. The Washington Commanders, they're in a full rebuild after tearing down most of their defense last year. I mean, we are the beneficiaries with the acquisition of Montez Sweat, right? Thank you, Washington. We're now talking about another Commanders player becoming available, a former first rounder and two-time Pro Bowler. He'll likely be available very soon. And this potential transaction, it's getting more and more steam online. And I just want to suggest it here. Star defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, he could generate a return in a trade from Chicago, and Washington could consider dealing the two-time Pro Bowler. The Washington Commanders, they're not outwardly showing interest in a Jonathan Allen trade right now, but there was a lot of smoke on it last year. It was rumored to be happening, and I believe that will change after June 1st. June 1st is a soft deadline that's coming up, and this might make all the difference here. Also, there's some smoke here previously as well. And check out what Allen had to say in December. Washington's first round draft pick, right, in 2017. He's never won a playoff game. He's only been to the playoffs once. And he was asked on 106.7 The Fan whether he ever thought about leaving the Commanders. And his answer was 1000%. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. And Allen said he'd love to play for a winning franchise in Washington, but if the Commanders are heading into yet another rebuild, he'd rather be elsewhere. And this is straight from him. I play this game to win, and I would love to win here for sure, but I want to win first and foremost. So that's always going to be at the front and center of my mind, and everything I'm going to be doing in my career is going to make sure I have an opportunity to win. So Washington, they now have an opportunity to sell high. They're continuing to shed payroll. They're continuing to try to infuse this team with younger talent. And I'm going to go to the story on heavy.com. You can really find this potential trade almost anywhere. It is everywhere online right now. So he's 29 years old. He likely won't be there when they're ready to compete. He carries a 21.4 million cap hit. But if he's traded right now, the relief given would only be about 9.4. But if Washington makes a deal after June 1st, they'd be able to clear 15.4 million off their ledger. And I think they get it done with a willing team. Bleacher Report, they just ran a story in agreement as well. And looking at it from our end, what's the potential cost? It's kind of similar to Montez Sweat, a second rounder next year. And guess what? We've got two of them. It kind of feels like a no-brainer. And also 29, 30 years old, that's still well within the prime for a stud defensive tackle. So we're looking at Allen as a two-time Pro Bowler, but some have questioned whether their new front office has the 29-year-old now in their long-term plans. So Washington's been kind of telegraphing this. He has 2 years left on his contract, but Washington just signed fellow defensive tackle Daron Payne to a $90 million contract last offseason. They also have 2 second-round picks waiting in the wings. I mean, they just drafted Jerzon Newton out of Illinois. We know him well with the 36th pick. I'm going to close this down. Check out that profile. It's just going to kind of go into detail, but I always want to give credit. So doesn't it look like the writing's on the wall here in Washington? Allen is not in their long-term plans, and I think it's time for Chicago to pounce on this. So the only thing is that he could be seeking a contract rework. He's making below the market rate for the high-end defensive tackles, but ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, he's spoken with a few league executives, and they're certain that the Commanders probably won't ever make him an offer, so he's going to become available. To further bolster this thought as well, Bleacher Report, Alex Ballentine on Bleacher Report, he believes that the Bears can give Allen a fresh start. And he also proposed this trade to bring him to Chicago. He pitched us giving up a 2025 second round pick, no problem, and a 2026 fifth rounder to land him. I think that is more than a fair price. And Allen might be better off in a situation where he's still a featured player. This is from Ballentine. That would certainly be the case in Chicago, where he would reunite with former Commanders teammate Montez Sweat and net a similar trade return to what the New York Giants got for Leonard Williams. So there's a lot of precedent that this should be the asking price, but here's the kicker. The move wouldn't be cheap. A second rounder, that's nothing to sneeze at, and that's for a player who will be 30 years old when the season starts. But in 2024, we'd be talking about taking on 15.4 million and about 16.5 million in 2025. That's by his current contract. That's completely, to put it into perspective, Christian Wilkins, he just got 27.5 a year from the Raiders in free agency. So the question of whether we can pay it on his contract that he has right now, that shouldn't be a problem. We have about 12.4 left in functional cap space after the rookies are signed. It requires some maneuvering, but we could get it done. Like, we could drop Borum. We have some veterans that aren't producing that we could eke out that extra money. But the main issue price-wise, I think he's probably looking for a restructure. That's likely the reality. So can the Bears justify 21 to maybe 24 million per season for a 30-year-old player? I think we probably can. We can make it work, but I think it only warrants signing like a 2-year contract. We don't want to be stuck long term for a player that's getting a little long in the tooth. But man, putting him on this defense and getting immediate production, that might be exactly what the doctor ordered, but it doesn't really fit what Ryan Poles typically does. So, one thing that was mentioned on that heavy.com article that I think was absolutely fantastic, and this is something that I wasn't originally thinking of, we could follow the path of what we did to acquire Montez Sweat, right? If Washington holds off on the transaction, this could be getting done at the midseason trade deadline. And this might be actually a better option for us as a team. So we get that time to see if Gervon Dexter or Zach Pickens, how they respond to at least the elite coaching of Eric Washington. Sorry, couldn't talk for a second. And also, I think this is when we'll definitely be happy to get a boost. That's when the schedule gets nasty after a first half. I mean, looking at it on paper, it looks like a cakewalk. No team in the NFL has an earlier and easier first 10 weeks than the Chicago Bears do. That might be nice. Get a shot in the arm at the trade deadline. We can let Dexter get first crack at the 3-tech. If he balls out, problem solved, right? We could rotate in Pickens and who I think is a very promising young player and undrafted free agent Keith Randolph Jr. But if this doesn't work out, Allen's still there. We can pounce on it then. We can kick handling the contract into the offseason or work out something for a couple of years, signing him immediately. People said that we couldn't do that and make it work with Montez Sweat, but we got the contract done immediately during the season. And now next year, that contract that we have Montez Sweat on is going to look like an absolute bargain. So let's talk a little more about what's been done this offseason. We now have Caleb Williams, right? Ridiculous receivers, best secondary in the league, a premier edge rusher in Montez Sweat. You guys know that. But I've been talking a lot about developing Gervon Dexter into a 3-tech, the need for Zach Pickens to develop, of course, bringing in the impact undrafted free agent in Randolph. I just talked about that. And if you look back on previous weeks, that's been bandied about a lot on Sports Talk Bears. But this Alabama product is an absolute stud. He'd be perfect for completing this defense. And I think the Washington Commanders, they'd be absolutely elated to get a second rounder for a guy who, frankly, he's not going to be there anyways when they're built up, when they're ready to compete. I want to go to a different direction. I want to go to a story on NBC Sports Chicago, and it's kind of going into Matt Eberflus's thoughts on the need for a 3-tech defensive end that's dominant to make this defense run. So basically, Coach Flus's defensive scheme relies on 3 main components, and I'm going to also have a quote highlighted here from Coach Flus. So let me get back to it. Coach Flus's defensive scheme, it relies on 3 main components: a dominant 3-tech, a stud will linebacker, and a versatile nickel corner. So Flus, he comes to town. We thought we had Roquan Smith to take over the Shaquille Leonard role from the defense Coach Flus had established in Indy. It was a great unit. And Shaquille Leonard, he filled a main spot in that. But Roquan, he made contract negotiations almost impossible. His production wasn't all the way there, I would say, and he went to Baltimore for the pick we ended up using on Gervon Dexter, right? I just did a story on Kyler Gordon. Spider-Man, he has grown into exactly the type of nickelback this team needs. Check mark on that. Will linebacker, TJ Edwards, he was acquired last year. He is absolutely that guy. He's a solution there. We're all set there. Check. But we're still missing this piece. And here's what Flus had to say about why a stud 3 tech is needed in this scheme. I mean, it affects absolutely every position on the defense. And you guys can follow along here. We call it the engine that makes everything go because in the running game, you can't run at the 3 and you can't run away from them. So it's hard to really dictate where you're going to run the ball, number one. And it creates a lot of free lanes for your linebackers to run through in the run game. That's what he explained at Hallis Hall in an interview. He goes on to say, but in the pass game, a lot of times when you have 2 of them, you have a 3 tech and you have a defensive end opposite of them. It's hard to move your line that way. He creates a ton of one-on-ones, and he's typically overmatched on a guard. Typically, your best offensive linemen are on the outside. And if you have one of your best players on the inside, that's certainly an advantage for you. So if whoever is in at 3 tech fails to disrupt, not just fill the spot, but be absolutely disruptive doing it, a good offense, they can choose how to attack the defense instead of the defense controlling the conversation, right? And I'm going to close down this story. Just really good profile on NBC Sports Chicago. Check it out. So to continue, with only one threat to get to the quarterback in Montez Sweat, that's really all we have is a credible pass rush. Blitzing a great deal. That many times becomes a necessity, and I don't want to blitz like crazy. We can look to our past to see how a stud defensive tackle and will linebacker, how they can make a very good defense almost unstoppable in this cover 2 defense. And let's hear it from Flus. He recognizes this as well. Yeah, if you do it like we've done it, this is what he had to say. The old school Tampa Bay, Chicago Bears, they used to put Lance Briggs, Derek Brooks behind the 3 tech. They would always travel together. That means you're covered to the hit all the way to the end. It would create a lot of things with that. Last place I was at, DeForest Buckner and Shaq Leonard, he was always covered to the hit. Those 2 positions are really important to us. So, I mean, that's kind of my thought. This isn't a confirmed deal that's going to happen, but it makes total sense. It's being picked up by sources all over the internet. Also, this was a rumored get that would be possible last year. And also with the signings that the Commanders have made at defensive tackle, plus the draft capital on 2 defensive tackles, one signed very, very high. Sounds like a little bit like us. But I just think it makes too much sense not to go down. And also, why have this defense ready to go? We've made this mistake before with teams, right? We've had like our defense all made, all ready to go, and then we haven't completed the offense. Now we're vice versa. We have the offense completed. I think the offensive line is going to be underrated good, and I'm going to do a story on that later in the week. But we've got the offense in really good shape. We've got the defense already arguably a top 5 unit, but it's incomplete. We've made a mistake of not completing our lines, not completing both sides of the ball, and wasting the prime of a lot of really good players. Right now, why don't we take the opportunity to fill this defensive tackle right now with Jonathan Allen, who's a proven stud, give us a little more breathing room to develop Gervon, to develop Zach Pickens, to see what Randolph is, and then be a winning team. Be a playoff team at minimum this year by completing this defensive line right now. Then we can look at the price that we paid for Jonathan Allen. We can sign him for a 2-year deal. We can maybe hold on for 1 more year and address a stud defensive tackle, address a defensive end to add to this team in next year's draft. And it's only going to cost us a 2nd rounder next year. We'll find the money to pay it. We can maneuver the cap. We're still in excellent cap condition for next year. I think we're in the top 10 already of teams in cap space next year, if you can believe it. That's one of the benefits of having a quarterback that's on a rookie contract, right? All things said, it makes too much sense not to do it. I'm an advocate of it, especially if it's a short contract. And you guys let me know what's up. I'm not fully comfortable going into the season with a defensive tackle as is, while at the same time we're trying to develop a right end in Austin Booker, who I think is the truth there, but it's going to take some time to develop him. So let's strike now. Let's get it done and let's get ready for the season. Let's dominate. You guys let me know what you think. Bear down. It's so fun spending this time with you, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.